And we will start with one of our favorite topics, Zero, and that is loot boxes. Loot
Yes.
boxes. I mean, you can't talk about the business and culture around video games without talking about wonderful, beautiful loot boxes. And basically, the main talking about with loot boxes now is that some countries are now starting to take a crack at them and try and regulate them, or in some cases, flat out ban them. Spain became the newest country to do so. Basically, it's the same as Belgium and Germany. I think was it Belgium and Germany or Belgium and the Netherlands? Wait, Belgium.
Belgium and the Netherlands, they
Okay.
have a hard ban on loot boxes because their gaming commissions do consider them as gambling, and
Yes.
that's why they're banned from video games.
Right.
So, copies of games like FIFA are pretty much illegal to sell in both and Belgium and the Netherlands, and it's kind of funny with regards to those two countries because I forget what year it was, but it was when the laws had just kicked off, and the newest iteration of um, I think it was one of the NBA 2K games came out,
Yeah.
and and on social media it just sort of went wild on fire and everything, with just uh, players in Belgium and the Netherlands going, "Yo, what the shit? I can't play the my career mode because loot boxes. Yo, what the shit?" And I think 2K put out like this dumb fluff, sort of like mention of, "Hey, if you all don't like it, you should raise social awareness that this is an injustice to
Oh
your
yeah.
game or whatever." And it was so bad because it was just like a lot of other people were just like, really, um loot boxes being banned is an injustice against the world. Shut the fuck up, 2K. And I was just like, holy shit.
Loot boxes for social justice.
Yeah, it was like the wildest thing. I was just like, wow, someone at 2K clearly didn't think this through because now they're just getting clowned on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I'll quote the article from Reuters about this specific topic. Spain is set to become the first European country to have a law regulating the use of so-called loot boxes. I love how they use so-called in video games, aiming to avoid, end quote, thoughtless, compulsive, or even pathological consumer behavior. The government said on Wednesday of last week. Um, when we talked about this before we recorded, I had an issue with basically them making it a morality issue, making it basically a and I think the term pathological was where I was like, that kind of perked my ears up and went, that this doesn't sound great. But I think you mentioned also in it that it was more the compulsory thing, where it was designed to get people to constantly engage and put money into said item until they are quote unquote satisfied with what they got. So, go ahead.
Yeah, because later in the article, they have a mention about the reason that they use the pathological term.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the statements that was mentioned was 3 out of 10 Spanish students spent money in 2021 to improve their ranking, characters, accessories, or image in video games after the initial purchase of loot boxes.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, that is true. Okay, and that is true not only for young people but old. Anyone who's a gamer who is actually engaged with. Again, there's some who haven't; they just refuse. But there are some that I think all that have engaged in this have been part of that kind of cycle where they would spend more money to get better gear, better players, better whatever. Like I've done it, and I will admit to that, but
Yeah, hell, I'll fess up too. Just for anyone who thinks that just I've got no perspective on it.
mhm.
When Genshin Impact came out, for me, it was fucking Waifu City. I was just like, oh man, love this. And I shit you not, I bought the $100 Genesis Gems pack so I could just pull like a bunch of characters and everything. And yeah, just I'm guilty of it too. But as the years have gone by, I'm definitely hardening myself up more and more against loot boxes and everything. Because just it gets to be a deep rabbit hole because you just want to chase that high of just pulling that one rare chase character, rare item, a super sick looking skin. Just there's always something that just tickles that primal need of I want the shiny. And yeah, just I can see why a lot more countries are starting to get on board with the whole, yeah, we should probably ban these loot boxes because they're pretty freaking terrible.
Yeah. Now, I got a question for you. This is going to become the third, it's the third country in Europe to have some kind of regulation on these loot boxes. My question is to you. Do you think this is coming to the U.S.?
I would say possibly, but that's only with perspective to Diablo Immortals and how bad the monetization has been.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since you have like current estimates of stuff like I think almost $500,000 to get completely geared out and everything that you would have to just dump into Diablo Immortals. And then on top of that, you had Quinn69 out in New Zealand who spent the equivalent of $16,000 just to see how long it would take for him to bump into a 5-star, fully 5-starred out gem, and even $16,000, that's completely bonkers.
Yeah.
And I know the ESA has always been, we're self-regulating. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. We'll make sure things don't ever get out of hand. We promise, because there's no need for the government to step in. And then you have stuff like just the sheer greed of Diablo Immortal just kind of right out on display. And it's just kind of like, yeah, I have a feeling that you might have some government officials in the U.S. probably giving that the side eye, going, yeah, if it takes $16,000 to get like a single good gem in the game, something doesn't smell right, and this smells rife for abuse.
So here's the thing, okay? Well, first off, the ESA. The ESA is a lobbying group for the gaming industry, and to think that they're going to self-regulate their industry when the industry itself pays for their dues in order for them to lobby, I think is kind of... That's the same thing as like a corporation investigating itself and clearing itself of wrongdoing. Like, that's just ridiculous. You couldn't... And anyone who was like, oh, the ESA will do it, probably didn't think that straight and was like, oh, that's not how it's going to work. The ESRB also relies on... I think the ESRB is a different organization, right? But the
ESRB is a foundation founded by the ESA.
Okay, so they're attached to the ESA. Okay, so yeah, these guys are not going to... They're not going to self-regulate. They're going to do enough to make sure... They're really the PR for the entire industry. So when people are like, why won't the ESA do something? They are doing something. They're softening the blow just enough so it won't get government regulators involved. So, but here's the thing also. People who are asking to get in the United States for these loot boxes to get banned, you're in for a rude awakening. And it's because that basically, and I'm not a legal expert, but I have read articles on this. Basically, loot boxes are First Amendment protected. And the reason why some legal people who are illegal or in the legal profession think this is because there was a lawsuit in the 70s about baseball cards. And basically someone sued a baseball company. I think it was Bowman at the time. Baseball cards are essentially First Amendment protected. Loot boxes, ergo, is also First Amendment protected. So asking for it to be banned is just not going to work. Even if they put a law out saying it's banned, the ESA will go to a higher court, or will go even to the Supreme Court and say this is unconstitutional. You can't do this. Here's our precedent, and they'll probably win. So asking for the ban will not work. What will work is getting it regulated. What?
Yep.
So,
and I think it's really just trying to regulate loot boxes and things like that to gambling is a much more, I guess, realistic way that a ban could happen, or maybe just gating it off to just 18 plus players in general, mostly because a lot of the loot boxes, at least in the US, they technically don't have to disclose the odds, and there's all sorts of very shaky legal loopholes that you can use. I think we covered this when we did our Diablo Immortal special, but Blizzard came up with a clever way to basically evade the loot box regulation in Diablo Immortal by basically saying the legendary crests are technically not loot boxes, that they are tokens to use in the rifts, and if you beat the rift, then yeah, you get your items, but if you don't beat the rift, then you get your legendary crest back. So Blizzard has a very clever and snaky way of basically saying, hey, look guys, it's technically not gambling, you're just buying tokens to a skill game, guys.
It didn't work though, but it was a good try, I would say. But yeah, those who would look at that and say, well, that's technically not a loot box because you need skill in order to actually obtain the item, is basically, the workaround on that. But let's talk about regulation, really, because the best thing you can do, and I think we talked about this on maybe even Diablo or maybe another time. Basically, the idea I have is basically this: if you basically, there has been precedent in the ESRB that if a game has gambling, like straight up gambling, it's a mature rated game. Okay, I think it was, well, the ESRB wasn't around when Vegas Stakes came out on the Super NES, but I remember distinctly that I couldn't buy that game without my mom's permission because it had gambling in it. I remember this. So anyway, but basically, if it has gambling in it, it's a mature rated game because in order to gamble, you have to be 18 or over to do it. So that basically means in order to engage with gambling, you have to be over the age of 18, which means it has to be an adult-rated game. So it's adults only. By doing that, and by saying, well, if you have to be 18, you can only use adults-only games to use those gambling. By that point, all the console manufacturers don't want adults-only games on their console. So they either have to make two choices. They either have to say, okay, we have to allow a lot adults-only games on here, or they basically say, well, then we can't have these loot boxes in here because that's considered gambling. If that's adults only, then that's over. We're not doing it. So that's really the only way, is to basically regulate it to the point where it's completely untenable for the business to work. Now, would that also cause legal issues? Probably. But it's actually a little more legally sound to do that than to just try and ban the item itself. Because you can make an argument that loot boxes is an artistic expression, and you can't really regulate artistic expression. So, yeah, that's my opinion. That's my opinion on it, at least.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if this report gets stacked onto the one that I believe either Finland or Norway put out a couple weeks ago, basically equating loot boxes to gambling, because
Hmm.
I know that particular report got 18 other countries in the EU to say, hey, yeah, we think it's time to start regulating loot boxes because, yeah, this report makes some very substantial claims in their research.
Hmm.
So we think it's probably a good idea to start considering the ban of loot boxes.
And we're looking at also companies that or games that had loot boxes are now considering taking them out. I look at Overwatch 2, for example. They're completely getting rid of loot boxes in that game in exchange for battle passes. So you might see more games actually saying, well, we don't want to deal with that then, so we'll just put battle passes in the game instead. Or we'll just straight up tell you if you want to buy this thing, it's $20 and go from there. So that might be what eventually happens, but Spain looking to regulate loot boxes is interesting. I don't know how big their economy is. Let me look. It's GDP of 1.2 billion. That's not bad. 1.2 billion dollars is their GDP. So that's a pretty sizable amount of. That's a pretty sizable economy. It's the fourth biggest economy in the EU. So with that's and 14th in the world. That's big. That's a big country that's looking at basically taking a sizable revenue from the gaming industry and saying, "Nah, we're not allowing that." So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. You have anything to add on that?
No, no. I think for me, it'll just be real interesting to see how the um, really how the game industry will proceed in, and if countries around the world will just start taking a harder stance on loot boxes, with possibly going further with banning them or just regulating them away as gambling.
Okay.